The Royals will have some reinforcements on the way before the Baltimore series, so let's break it down next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Royals channel. If you want to know a little bit more about us and me, I guess I should probably say, since I'm the only one hosting it, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some co-hosting, some producing, some hosting as well. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And even though we're in an off day, there was a little bit of activity that we're going to talk about throughout today's show. We're going to talk about Michael Massey likely being activated onto the roster tomorrow. I would also expect Drew Waters to be activated. That kind of has some sort of a feel to it. They both were removed from the game in Omaha last night, and then were not in the lineup today. So I would expect to move sometime tomorrow afternoon. And then we're going to preview that series against Baltimore. But before we dive into segment number one, want to give a shout out to the title sponsor today in Monopoly Go, one of the most fun mobile games out there. If you're a Monopoly nerd like me and you just want to play on your phone and want it to be easy, play on whatever platform it may be, well, a lot of people are out there doing it. Over 150 million downloads for Monopoly Go. You can check the leaderboards, how everybody around the world is doing. If you are building an empire, or if you're bankrupt, you'll be able to see all of that. It's just a fun game. We're going to talk about them a little bit later on in today's show. But back to the Kansas City Royals. Nick Loftin was demoted to AAA earlier today, and that was the responding move, I guess I should say, although it can't really be a responding move until Michael Massey's actually put on the roster. But they decided that this is what they were going to do first. It is probable at this point that Massey's already in Kansas City. He's probably got his locker all ready to go, and it seemed like this was the best time to get Michael Massey back up to Kansas City. They had taken it a bit slow with him in Omaha, but he had been tearing the cover off the ball. His OPS is north of 1.2. He was hitting well over 400. He had popped a couple long balls. Whatever soreness he was dealing with, the tightness in his back, it seems to be completely gone. And that does put to bed the everyday starts for Adam Frazier at second base. I know for a chunk of fans out there, you were growing tired of seeing Adam Frazier out there. You were growing tired of seeing Garrett Hampson get at bats. Here's the reality now. With Nick Loftin going to AAA, and I saw a couple people questioning it. Why send Nick Loftin, whose OBP was north of 370, had a couple big games on the road trip? Why send Nick Loftin down, and why not just DFA or send down Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson? Well, I always felt like from the beginning that Nick Loftin was given this spot on the opening day roster and told, hey, when Michael Massey gets healthy, when he comes back, you are likely going to be the move. I'm not an expert into what was said to him. I'm just saying sometimes that happens where a player makes the roster and it's, hey, make the most of this. Make the most of this. We know you're going to be back at some point, but just don't beat yourself up if you hit 300, 350 and you're demoted. They also might not have told him, because if you were told that, you may not play good baseball over the couple of weeks because you're thinking, well, no matter how I play, I'm going back down to the minor league. So who knows how it was really handled. But as a spectator, I felt like from opening day, that was going to be the plan. If Nick Loftin hit 400, he was still getting sent back down. Maybe that's a little bit too harsh, but the Royals signed two guys for depth that were on major league deals, Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier. They are not abandoning those moves 19 games into the season. Nick Loftin has options, and Nick Loftin's not playing every day in Kansas City. He will get to play every single day in Omaha, and I fully expect him to be back at some point this season and probably in the near future. But the reality is right now, that Michael Massey is coming back to be the everyday second baseman. The lineup will probably have more, I guess, locked in spots is what I should say. They'll still rotate guys from time to time, but Michael Massey's not coming up to split time with Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier like Nick Loftin was. Michael Massey is coming back to take that everyday job at second base, and they wanted to wait till he had really gotten back into the groove, which he had in Omaha. Like I said, hitting over 400. He had played about 8 games there, had 1 game in Northwest Arkansas. He got ironed out whatever was bothering him at the very tail end of spring training, and now he seems to be ready to go. The move hasn't been official yet, but by this time, well, I guess that would be 6 minutes before first pitch. Actually, let's go with saying this. By this time tomorrow, he will be taking the field. That's my firm prediction at this point. I think Michael Massey will be in the lineup tomorrow. I think he'll be at second base. He was the corresponding move for sending Nick Loftin down, and maybe he's the spark that this offense needs a little bit. Maybe he is the guy that, is fresh in the lineup, has a little bit of that excitement of it's his first game of the year. That can always spark a team. We see that over the course of 162, that players being in the lineup for the first time, making their season debut, it adds a little bit of juice. Now, it's a very tough team that the Royals are going to be going up against. Nobody is putting the weight of the offensive struggles on Michael Massey's shoulders, but I do think he's going to give you more than Adam Frazier was, more than Garrett Hampson, and quite honestly, I think he'll be giving you more than what Nick Loftin was. Michael Massey, to me, of everybody, is the most polished hitter at this point in time. That's going to get pushed back. I totally understand that, because Michael Massey wasn't that good last year. But I would say Adam Frazier is far past his prime. He's a depth piece. Garrett Hampson is just a depth piece. Nick Loftin can get there. He just doesn't have enough ABs under his belt. Like, game on the line, 9th inning, you're facing a great closer. I guess it would depend righty or lefty, but I would feel a little bit more comfortable with Michael Massey, and that's just because of the reps, the repetition. Nick Loftin, I hope, can get there. He's a first-round pick. He's got the talent. But we also see at times and at bats where he's completely overwhelmed. 3-pitch strikeouts, swinging at pitches that are way out of the zone, and you can't have that. Right now, somebody's going to probably be in the comments and say, well, come on, Jack. He hit pretty well. I think it was like 270, 280. OBP was north of 370. What are you telling me about Nick Loftin looking overwhelmed? Well, it's also the small sample size approach, right? Nick Loftin has a very small sample size. And the hope is that Michael Massey comes in and wins the job at second base. Like, he comes in tomorrow and we never look back. That's the hope, because the Royals have high hopes for Michael Massey. Nick Loftin, I've always believed, had some spot on this team. And I still believe that to be the fact. I think if we get to June or July and Garrett Hampson's doing exactly what he's doing, Nick Loftin will take his spot and the Royals will feel fine cutting bait at that point in time. And if you like Garrett Hampson's utility, you like his speed, well, he's just nowhere near being a good threat with the bat. Nick Loftin can be, at least better than Hampson, and he can move around the field just like Hampson. He just doesn't have the speed. But you've got a speed guy in Dairon Blanco. So how many pinch runners do you really? That's what I think tomorrow is going to be exciting with. I think that Michael Massey taking that second base job and running with it is going to make you feel really good about the infield. Now, Michael Garcia has to get back up on the horse. He's got to shake whatever slump he's been in. But Bobby Witt Jr., Benny Pasquantino seem to be the best pieces in that infield. If Garcia can get back to where he was and Massey takes a little bit more of an improvement from what he did last year, you feel really good about that infield. Really, really good. And Massey was a great hitter in the minor leagues. I do think that of all the options, he's the best fit to be that everyday second baseman. I'm more of a Michael Massey fan than maybe most out there, but we talked about this in our season preview, like right before the season started and before we really knew Michael Massey was going on the injured list. He popped 15 home runs last year, and that was with him being unplayable in April, unplayable for half of May. You think about it, if he comes back and he doesn't miss a beat and he's not having any limitations with his back and there's not really a learning curve, I imagine there'll be some learning curve. He's going from hitting AAA arms to big league arms. But if he plays the rest of the season without any limitations, a 20 home run second baseman, I'd even take 15 again. I'd like to have a little bit more well-rounded part of his game. But I think Michael Massey can take this job and run with it. With Nick Loftin being demoted, I do think Michael Massey will be the corresponding move, and I anticipate him being in the lineup tomorrow night against the Baltimore Orioles. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, Michael Massey wasn't the only guy pulled from Omaha's lineup last night. Drew Waters was pulled as well. Is he on his way to Kansas City? And if so, whose spot is he going to take? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to a few sponsors today, but we're going to start with Policygenius. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you talk through it. Talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step. And you can easily compare quotes to America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. So here's what you need to do. Go and check your life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to polygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description that we post below to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's polygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. We also want to give a shout out to the mobile game that we were preaching before the show opened up today. And yes, that is Monopoly Go. Now, I have been told before that I'm a very competitive person. You might have heard it just when I'm talking Royals baseball, when I'm interacting on social media. I've got a competitive streak in me. And with that competitive side, I'm also a huge fan of not just the Royals, but I am a fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great twist on Monopoly where you can play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations and building up amazing cities that bring you the big money. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go. Now it's free in the Apple Store or on Google Play. I promise you it is a mobile game that you will be very addicted to. I found myself today at work playing it a little bit as well. And I talked about those leaderboards, constantly checking where I rank. And spoiler alert, it's not very high up on the leaderboards. But you're probably a much better Monopoly player than I ever hoped to be or aspire to be. All right, back to the Kansas City Royals, who are in their off day today. They'll welcome the Baltimore Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays for a homestand beginning tomorrow night. It'll be Dean Kramer going up against Alec Marsh in Game 1, Corbin Burns, Cole Reagans Game 2, and it'll be Seth Lugo and Cole Irvin in Game 3 of that series. Now, we talked about Michael Massey and that he is 90% going to be in the lineup tomorrow night. They demoted Nick Loftin earlier today, didn't announce Michael Massey coming off the injured list, but everybody talking about this has made the decision Michael Massey is going to be in Kansas City tomorrow and likely in that lineup. The other one that's a little bit more complicated and, to me, a curious case was Drew Waters was pulled in the Omaha game last night at the same time Michael Massey was. Now, Drew Waters has been hitting the cover off the ball in AAA to begin the year. I thought he had a pretty good spring training. I was just more focused on Kyle Isbell because I knew going into spring training, that's who they wanted to win the job, or at least they expected to win the job. But Drew Waters is hitting over 300, WRC plus north of 120. His walk rate is nearing 9%, still striking out a little bit too much, but that's just a part of his game. Defense has been phenomenal. He's popped a couple home runs. He's driving in runs. And if Drew Waters is on the same path as Michael Massey, he grabbed that flight, or maybe he hopped in an Uber, a taxi, whatever it would be, to get to Kansas City from Omaha. I actually think the Storm Chasers were on the road last night, so that wouldn't have made sense. However, he got to Kansas City. I wonder if he was on the same flight as Michael Massey. But unlike Massey, they've already made the move. Nick Loftin was going to Omaha, and he's an infielder, and he's played a lot of second base. So that makes sense that Michael Massey would take his spot on the roster. Drew Waters is different, because if Drew Waters comes up to the big league roster, he doesn't play the infield. So it would have to be one of your 5 outfielders. You have MJ Melendez. Melendez is not going down to AAA Omaha. You have Kyle Isbell. We'll get to him here shortly. You've got Nelson Velasquez and Hunter Renfroe. Neither of them are going down. You've got Garrett Hampson. We just talked about with Massey. They're not DFAing a guy they had a 1-year deal to. And you have Dairon Blanco. To me, if Drew Waters is coming up and there's not an injury, right, that's the concern right now is there an injury? That happened in the doubleheader, and that's why Drew Waters is coming up to Kansas City. That would be, to me, the worst-case scenario. You know, if you have an injury and it's to a key player in your lineup and you need reinforcements, well, there's 2 guys now who didn't start the year with you now taking 2 spots in the lineup. Massey, of course, was supposed to be an opening day starter. Drew Waters never really was. So this comes back to Kyle Isbell, because Dairon Blanco is your perfect 4th outfielder. He's a base stealer. You know, he's stolen 5 bases already. He got thrown out in game 2 of the doubleheader, but still, I mean, he is a threat on the base paths. He's got 80 grade speed. So if you demote him, it doesn't really make sense because you take a weapon off your bench. And then I guess it comes down to, if you did demote Dairon Blanco and you keep Kyle Isbell, it shows that you maybe value a 4th defensive outfielder than a pinch runner. And you could also make the case, though, that Blanco can be a better hitter than Kyle Isbell. Now, I was a Kyle Isbell apologist. I was defending him toward the end of spring training of, listen, for those of you that want Blanco to start every other day or want Waters to start every single day, it's just not going to happen. I thought Kyle Isbell was good enough defensively that if he was just a league average bat, it would carry over. He would be fine. He would be a 3-WAR player, a 3.5 WAR player, which you would take in a heartbeat. The problem is we gave the benefit of the doubt to Kyle Isbell last year. Really good defensively, bat truly never shined. There were moments that he caught fire, had consistency, but then was hampered by an injury. This year, I thought to begin the year, I'm thinking, oh, Kyle Isbell's doing his job. This is exactly what the Royals would hope for. But then this road trip happened, and everything kind of changed. He had 1 hit on the road trip. That was still 1 more than MJ Melendez and Michael Garcia combined. In fact, Melendez, Garcia, and Isbell were 1 for 51 on the road trip. Ugly, ugly numbers. But this would be a cutthroat move by the Royals. If the Royals bring up Drew Waters to take Kyle Isbell's spot, it shows you right now, even with the winning, we're not going to stand for that in center field. You got to have more of a bat. And Drew Waters has a higher ceiling, always has, over Kyle Isbell. He's a switch hitter. He had the longest home run of any player last year on the Royals at 465 feet to the back part of the fountains in right center field. He is nearly as good defensively as Kyle Isbell. What he does worse at the plate than Isbell is he strikes out a lot more. But the question becomes, are you ready to gamble on that upside? And is it worth the gamble? Because Kyle Isbell is the safe pick at this point. It's clear what his bat is going to do. Even though I could sit here and say it's going to come around, he can hit 230. His OBP right now, I think, is around the 230s, 240s. And that's another part of Kyle Isbell's game that I just wish was a lot better. Seeing pitches, taking walks. He's just a contact hitter, and he doesn't hit the ball incredibly hard. He's great defensively, and I firmly believe if this move happens and Drew Waters isn't hurt, right? If this is a scenario where Waters is pulled from the game, he's not in the lineup tonight because he's banged up, different story. We're not even talking about this anymore. But to me, if this is a flip, Isbell goes down or Isbell goes to the bench, there's a great scenario in the future where Drew Waters shines as the center fielder, takes that job and runs with it. And Kyle Isbell becomes an incredibly valuable 4th outfielder because his defense is unmatched. And then you think about late in the season, if the Royals are in contention, they are competing, and you can go to Drew Waters in right field and Kyle Isbell in center, and the same way they used to do that with Lorenzo Cain moving to right and Gerard Dyson would go to center, that's a dream scenario. That is an elite defensive outfield with at least 2 well above average guys. That's a great scenario. That would mean Blanco is no longer on the team, but maybe Kyle Isbell can swipe a ton of bags coming off the bench. He can be your pinch runner. Butters swiped 16 bags himself last year. He's more of a base running threat than Kyle Isbell. Now, it may not work out. Maybe they give the job to Drew Waters, and he bombs with it. He's striking out 40% of the time. It's the same thing as last year. But maybe at this point, we'll see tomorrow. Again, we'll know if this is actually a roster move or if Drew Waters is hurt. But if he comes up, I have no reason to believe he's coming up to sit the bench. I have reason to believe he is coming up because somebody else is hurt or that he is taking Kyle Isbell's job in center field. He's done his job in AAA Omaha, and I guess we'll get official word tomorrow. So it's more of a wait-and-see case at this point. I'm hoping by the time I post this that a roster move has not been announced. I'm really crossing my fingers that they won't announce any roster moves until tomorrow afternoon. Okay, before we move on to our final segment, want to give a shout-out here to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed to you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. For our final segment, let's preview a big-time series in Kansas City with the Baltimore Orioles coming to Kauffman Stadium. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15 and find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to the final sponsor today in PrizePicks. Spring training is over and baseball season is officially underway, so don't miss your chance to add your favorite from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first-inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entries today. You can also get on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on prize as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. And a reminder that the playoffs begin on Saturday, April 20th, and the last play-in round is tomorrow on Friday. So go get started with PrizePicks today. A huge series is happening at Kauffman Stadium beginning tomorrow. The Baltimore Orioles are coming to town. They are one of the youngest, funnest, most explosive teams, not just in the American League, but in all of baseball. Their prized phenom, Jackson Holliday, has been struggling mightily. He's 1 for 25 with 14 strikeouts to begin his big league career, but you still have to worry about Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg, Cedric Mullins, now Ryan O'Hearn, Anthony Santander, Ryan Mountcastle, James McCann. It's endless with that lineup. That lineup is unbelievably loaded, and the Royals got first of that when they were in Camden Yards for their first road series of the year. They only took one game and were walked off in their 2 losses. So this is the rematch. This is round 2. You get to face the same pitchers that you saw at Camden Yards at Oriole Park. You get Dean Kramer tomorrow night. The Royals fared pretty well against him in Game 1. You get Corbin Burns in Game 2. The Royals saw him in Game 3 of that series, and it was Cole Reagan's his counterpart in that game. And then you'll see Cole Irvin on Sunday, but the Royals are going to start Seth Lugo, who the Orioles did not see. They saw Michael Wacha instead in that first series of the year. This is going to be a lot of fun. I can now tell you officially I'm going Saturday, I'm going Sunday to those games. I want to get as much in of this series as I can. I looked at tickets today. I know I'm sounding like a mouthpiece and it's propaganda and I'm trying to publicize the team. I just think it would be great for Kansas City to have big crowds all weekend. I know the weather is not as it's been if you're based here in Kansas City, of course, where it was high 70s, 80 degrees, sunny. It was feeling really good. Of course, when they come back home, it dips into the high 50s and low 60s. And when you get into the nighttime in Kansas City and it's into the mid-50s, I know it gets a little bit chilly. Still, bring a jacket, bring a sweatshirt, bring a couple layers, bring a blanket, drink hot chocolate, drink something warm, maybe add a spike of alcohol into it, grab a beer. If you don't care about the cold, just like me, then it's fine. You know, you can just have a couple beers at the game and you'll be ready to roll. But this, to me, is that fun series where you can be really proud of what's happened through the first 20 games of the season. And you feel like your team is contending and competing at a high level. And you are facing the reigning AL East champions who had the #1 seed in the American League. It is April. This is not do or die. The Royals can get swept in this series, and it really not change the way I look at their season outlook. It's going to be a really tough series. I can't tell you with honesty that it's going to be the exact same way, the exact same competitive level that we saw at Oriole Park. I can't tell you that. And that's the risk of buying tickets and going to games. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, sometimes there's blowouts. The good thing is there's no ties. So you'll always get a determined winner and loser in this game. And it's going to be a tough game one. Alec Marsh, though he shoved against Baltimore in his first start of the year, it's tough to shove against him twice. And Alec hasn't been that great his last 2 starts. And the Royals offense is slumping a little bit. But this is a great time to show the team, the coaching staff, the front office. And I know that there's still going to be that strain. There always will be until the Royals get back to the postseason. But to go out there and support the guys who have played well through 19 games, it's not to hand them a ribbon, hand them a trophy, and say, thank you for fun 19 games. Okay, now we don't care what you do the rest of the year. This is what you show the rest of baseball. Hey, we are a team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. When you come to Kauffman Stadium, it's going to be tough to play here. We're going to be loud. We're going to have, 25 to 30,000 people nightly. And the weekend makes it easier. I know that school is still in session, and that's usually when it starts to get a little bit more crowded. The weather's always good. You'll go to a night game. It's 75 degrees. Feels great. But there has been many times in April that you can talk up a series over a course of 162 games. You're going to have Bobby Witt Jr. and Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holliday, right? Cole Reagans, Corbin Burns, Jordan Westberg and Michael Garcia and MJ Melendez. Not saying they're superstars, but the unsung young players, the guys that are making their rise. There's a lot of talent that's going to be on display all weekend long. It would be great to see a big turnout, and a couple of fun games over the weekend. I hope there's no blowouts. I hope that it comes down to the final 3 innings every single game. First 2 night games and then the day game, of course. I was about to say, I hope it comes down to the final pitch all 3 nights. Of course, Sunday's going to be that day game. But I'm going to go out there Saturday. I'm going to go out there Sunday. As I said at the beginning of the week, I'm never going to tell people how to spend their money. I'm never going to say you're a bad fan because you didn't go. I get people have obligations. But if you're on the fence and I can persuade you, I can get you to sway one way, man, it's going to be a fun weekend. And I hope people aren't taking the offense struggling and you have the off day, you lost to the White Sox, and now I'm not feeling as juiced up about this series. They're 12-7. They're in a wild card spot if you're into April scoreboard watching. In fact, Baltimore and Kansas City hold 2 wild card spots. They're chasing 2 teams, the Yankees and the Guardians, that are like a game ahead of them right now. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm hoping a lot of fans out there are sharing my sentiment. I've actually gotten a lot of people reaching out saying, hey, I'm going to the game. I'm taking my son. I'm taking my family. I'm taking my cousins. I'm taking my brother, taking my sister, taking my girlfriend, taking my boyfriend. I've loved everything that I've been hearing. And it sounds like a lot of people have set aside time to go out to the game because I believe there's nothing that beats a good baseball game, 2 really good teams. And what we've gotten the last 5 to 6 years has not been fun. There's not been a single series where I could say, man, this is a must-get ticket to go out there and see Mike Trout and the Angels and a superstar player. And back when Anthony Rendon still cared about baseball and Shohei Ohtani, and then the Royals just didn't really have the star player. You had Salvador Perez, but now you got Bobby Witt Jr., MVP candidate, a Cy Young candidate on Saturday, and a team that is right now in the playoff spot. 19 games in, I got to say it. It's fun to say it. I know for fans that have been just through the ringer like we all have, especially after last year, it's fun to say, hey, we have a wild card spot. We have a playoff spot, and we're competing for something. And this will be a big series, not just a throwaway series. You want to take this one. You want to get Baltimore back for what they did to you at Oriole Park. Should be a blast. If you are going out to the game, you're wanting to go out to the game, use Game Time. And if you've never used Game Time before, we've got that code. We'll probably talk about it a little bit tomorrow on Friday's episode for a Mailbag Friday. But seriously, I would love to see a lot of people out there, see a crowd of 30,000 on Friday, maybe even bigger on Saturday, and a pretty good, healthy crowd on Sunday as well. But again, I'm not going to tell people how to spend their money. If you want to watch it on TV or watch it at a bar, be my guest, as long as we're all watching and we're having fun with some winning baseball. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7. Cover the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to have our Mad Friday edition, and I'm going to send out that tweet probably in, well, I guess it doesn't matter because it's going to be delayed when I say it. It'll be coming out tonight, and you'll be able to send me all the questions on Twitter and send me some questions on YouTube. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.